So I watched this video this week as I was preparing. I actually watched two, and I'm gonna tell you about both of them instead of showing them because I didn't think to figure out a way to show them. But the first one, and it's really funny because it's Mother's Day, and you think it would be the opposite way, but it was Grandma and Grandpa's going to see the grandbabies, and Grandma's walking up the sidewalk, and the grandbaby comes out of the house, and the grandma gets out there to hug him, and the baby, it was like 5 or 6 of the babies running as fast as they could, and then they just went right on around Grandma, Papa! And they would run to Grandpa, and it was so funny because naturally, all of the grandmas get down to give the big hug, and the kid goes right around them, and there's Grandpa standing behind him, and there's a whole bunch of those, and so when I was thinking about the video, I was like, well, what's that all about? But being Mother's Day, the kids were excited, obviously, because Grandpa was there. But what does that have a tendency to say? Grandma's always there. They see Grandma more than they see Grandpa. So Grandpa was a bigger deal. And so as neat as that is, but that also shows us that the Grandma is usually around. That's not a good or bad thing. But we see that in our homes also. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But it just made me laugh because they just kept all of them. I mean, this one little kid, the grandma fell over trying to grab him. Like, no, me first. He was getting to Grandpa. And maybe Grandpa had some candy, and that's why. I don't know. Grandpas do have a tendency sometimes to pass out candy to the kids. That's what makes them the favorites. But then I saw this one, and this one made me think also with it being Mother's Day. And you might have seen this video. This was an edited version of it. And so they asked the parents, if you could eat lunch with anybody, alive or dead, who would you eat lunch with? Now the dead, they wouldn't be dead at lunch. So there was that part there, because you're like, that could be a rough lunch. But, and so people started listing famous people or somebody popular, famous, presidents, all of these people that they listed of who they would like to eat, have a meal with. And so as you're probably now thinking who you would like to eat, maybe it was a famous person or an actor or something like that, or somebody that's alive today you would want to eat. So they had all these lists. And so then they brought all the kids in and they asked the kids, if you could eat lunch with anybody, I mean like Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Captain America, Mickey Mouse, Pocahontas, whoever it would be, anybody you could have lunch with. And all of the kids said, Mom and Dad. One of them even said, does it have to be somebody like famous? Can it just be our family? And the parents are, what are all parents doing when they're watching their kids say that? That's my kids. I just love them. I didn't really mean I wanted to eat with the president. I thought that was just the plain answer. I really wanted to eat with my kids, But why? Why is it that way? Today is Mother's Day, in case you didn't know. And so we're going to talk about, as we've been talking about the identities of who we are, we're going to talk about the identity of a mom. Now, having a baby, in case you guys didn't know this, I'll give you some more deep information today. Y'all just learning so much these last couple of weeks. Having a baby just doesn't make you a mom. Did you know that? When we had, as I will say it this way, and Joy will correct me, when we had our kids, and Joy will say, you didn't have no kid, I did. But when you become a parent, I remember thinking, I do not understand how some parents are the way they are with kids. I'm looking at my kid and going, how could you, it doesn't make sense. But it's just not natural. It's not like when they give you the baby at the hospital and you go to sleep and then you wake up the next day and you have all of the knowledge of a mom and all of this compassion of a mom. Now, we're lucky and we're blessed today to be in a building with good moms, but the world is not full of good moms. The world has moms that don't care about their kids. Watch the news, and we will find moms that do things to their kids that you're like, how could you do that to your child? Why would you do that to your child? Because we live in a world that if we are not connected to Christ, self will always take over. We are always going to look for a way to be, you could say, selfish. Now, for those of you that, Joanne, just stand up, just maybe raise your hand again if you identify as a mom. You're a mom. And in that, one thing that you cannot do if you're a good mom is be selfish, because what are children? I know why you laugh now.
Sorry.
I was thinking, what did I say? I got it. But children do not let you be selfish, do they? I mean, fix you a nice bowl of whatever you like to eat. Ice cream. Anything, right? Pam says it doesn't matter. They don't even have to like it. You just fix it and it's yours, and sit down for that few minutes of what? Peace and quiet.
Especially when they're little.
Yes. And then when they're older and they're hungry and they want, it really never ends, I don't think. I'm pretty sure it's just forever.
It does not.
Mom, what you got?
Yeah.
Because now I'm going to ask, we've got moms in here and then we've all had moms, but isn't it just something magical that when mom makes something, it's always better than when you make it? It doesn't matter what it is. I don't know how it works. I don't know what they can use the same stuff sitting on the table and make it, and you eat it and you're like, gosh, that's good. And then when you make it, you're like, damn, mom made it. And you can sit there and make it with them, but there's just something moms bring to the table. Now, I'm going to list a few characteristics, identity markers of moms. And maybe if you're a mom in here, you're going to be like checking them off and going, yeah, that's me. That's me. Nudging the husband. He's talking about me. Or maybe you're thinking about this in the aspect of, man, this is my mom. Now, I want to say also that maybe you didn't have a good mom. And if that's the case, that's sometimes the way life goes. And we're going to talk a little bit about how even having a not good mom can be a good mom. So, but did you know that moms love? Did y'all not know that today? See, this is what you get when you come to church. You learn good stuff. You learn that moms love. But as I said a minute ago, not all moms love. So if you have a mom that loves you, that's something you can take for granted. Because you're thinking, well, all moms love. But not all moms love. I'm sure I said that right. Get that all mixed up. Because we live in a world where not all moms put their children first. Moms should be overflowing with joy. I know, we're already in there, y'all like, whoa, hold on. You're telling me as the mom who stayed up all night last with the kid that I need to have joy? Watch it. Jonathan, go start the car. No. Peace. How many of you moms have peace? Now I know, not because I'm a mom, but I've heard many stories about the praying mom. The mom that prayed their kid who was out there on the street or doing this and doing that, and the mom was praying. And that might be you. We might have prayed with you. You might have prayed with somebody praying for a child. Mom's trying to find that peace. Patience. How many of you moms are patient moms? You're like, my patience is running out right now with this list. Be patient. Gentleness. Faithfulness. Kindness. How many of you moms got self-control? And all y'all are going, like, right now. But these are, yes, what are they, Jordan? The fruits of the Spirit. But you see, the fruits of the Spirit are what make us who we are. They're our identity. And as I said, just because we list these things, I've seen people that are happy and they're not happy. How many of you have ever known somebody they thought that having a child was gonna fix their problems. I've heard people say that they thought maybe having a baby would fix their marriage. You're like, whoo. No. You just wait. You think it's bad now, add some more to it. Add something that's gonna constantly need your attention. Everybody say, amen, last night, that child. Well, no, not y'all. Y'all good on the front row. But am I wrong? Those long nights. The nights where you're just like, nobody can hear him crying. It's tough. It's hard. It's not easy. It is a sacrifice. And we're all here today because somewhere a mom sacrificed. Got up and made a lunch, made sure your laundry was done, made sure you stayed up, did a project, worked late, worked early, cooked, cleaned, sat up and gave you advice, talked, prayed, cried. It's a sacrifice. Now, this mama in the Bible gets a lot of credit this time of year. We like to bring her out and model her as one of the good moms in the Bible, and that's Hannah. You see, Hannah prayed. She couldn't have a baby, and she said, Lord, I'd love to have a child. Now, and as we know the story of Hannah just didn't pray to have a child, but Hannah made a deal with God. Some of you, if you know the story, you're thinking, man, I should have made the same deal. I should have gave, Lord, give me a child. No, Lord, you can have him back, please. None of y'all in here, of course not. But we did. We see this story in Hannah. Hannah gave away her child. Now, as moms in here, can you imagine that? Could you imagine asking the Lord for a child? Please, Lord, I just want a child. But then saying, if you will give me a child, I will give him back to you. Like I said, about 3 nights into those long colic nights and all of that, some of you are like, Lord. But she kept her word also. How many of us would have made that deal with the Lord, and then when we get the baby, and I just saw Pam showing them pictures of the baby going around, the grandbaby, and showing them all off and all that. But it's all sweet. She don't want to give it back then. But Hannah kept her word. You see, what we can learn from Hannah as a mom is not give your kids away. That's not the lesson here. The lesson we can learn from Hannah is that she trusted God's plan for her child better than her plan for her child. And that's hard as a parent, let alone a mom. Because moms know everything. They know what you do when you don't think anybody knows. Mom knows. They got super radar detecting ears, antennas. It never quits and it never goes old. When you walk in the room and they look at you, they know. They just ain't saying it. Isn't that right? And it never goes. They can walk in and go, something's up. And his husband is like, what? It took her 5 more minutes. Nope, something's up. I mean, they know. It's the Holy Spirit. With kids, don't think you can lie. Moms know. They know. First of all, because they haven't always been a mom, they've been a kid. And that's really why moms know. Is because we've all been kids. And we know the trick. We know something's up. But in all of that, moms know how to guide us through that. They know when, where, and how. When's the right time? When's the wrong time? They have that gentle nudge to the dad. It's time for you to go take care of something. But think about that. Hannah trusted God's plan for her child more than her own. Because I guarantee you in here, we would all write up a good story for our children. What we want them to do, right? Who wants their kids to get hurt? For those of you up here couldn't see, Florencio raised his hand. Or were you just stretching? I think he was just stretching. Yeah, he's putting his arm around to hug his daughter. But we would write and make the course for our child to be the least resistant, the easiest, not hard, right? And I know I struggle with that. I don't want my kids to go through hard times. But sometimes I gotta remember that sometimes hard things are good things. Pruning is good. But as a parent, we don't want to see our children hurt, do we? And if we think about it in our own lives and think about it from God's perspective, maybe something in our life that we're thinking is horribly hard and God is not sparing us from it, but God is understanding that the bigger picture is what? It will produce character and fruit. And that's hard. That's hard to step back sometimes and say, I've got to let my child go through this, deal with this. You know, we see a lot of times in generations today, well, we'll just be honest. Every once in a while we see a kid in the store and you're like, you need a whooping.
Yeah.
Now, a whooping don't always fix everything, but sometimes you can see one that like, he needed one like 15 years ago. 35 years ago. 45 years ago. You see some people in the store, you're like, you need a whooping right now. And then you see them mamas in the store, the grandmas at that point, they're looking at them, and you see them, they're fussing and something, and she's looking in her purse, and I was like, she's looking for the wooden spoon. She's going down aisle 4 to find one. It's like, oh ma'am, that's not your kid. You see, but Hannah shows us that a mom can display faith through her obedience. What is the greatest thing that a mom can do? I'm going to tell you right now. We'll skip to the good stuff. What's a good thing that a mom can do? The greatest thing that a mom can do, take notes. I'm only going to say it a couple times today probably. Model Christ. You see, because at the end of the day, all of us in here right now, we could take some paper out and I could say, do something, write something down that your mom does that you do. And you can list a couple of things. Cook something, stand something, wash your leg. There's something that you've picked up from your mom that you might not even know you've picked it up just from being around her, from seeing her do it all the time. Something they may say, you know, I ain't going to ask what y'all like, but y'all all sit in the same way. There. But it is. Because little girls, what do they want to do? They want to be like mom. Unfortunately, even little girls want to be like their moms when their moms are bad. Because it is the model that has been set in the home for them. And it's hard for us to understand that. They want to be like their mom. Now, most of us in here are lucky because, like I said, we have a room full of good moms. And good moms model what good moms should have good godly character and what that looks like. And they pass that on. Then they have the also mantle of being a good wife and modeling that. You see, because generally, if you have a boy, your boy is going to one day going to grow up and marry a woman. And he's going to look for some things that his mom did. So moms, you're setting not only as an example of what your daughter should act like, but what your son's going to marry. I asked a woman once at a store, we were talking about some things in her home, and I asked her that about her kids. I said, would you want your son to marry someone like you? She was like, she was quick, you know, what's our first answer? Well, yes. And I said, not the you on the outside, but the you. The you know who you are that you hide. And she's like, and I said, because you're modeling for your son. Yeah, that's a lot of responsibility. That's hard. Second thing you can do to be a great mom is take your kids to church. Don't drop them off and go home. Model the importance of godly character. Model what it's like to be Christ. Model what's important. Don't say what's important. Show them what's important. You see, because you can say this is important, But doing this tells your kid what? That's not really that important. This is more important. So take them to church. Always point them to God in everything. Because it's always the answer. God is always the answer. 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 through 28. I'm going to read you a little story. Anybody know what it is? Oh, that's a good start. Y'all throwing that Samuel out. Now, this story's been talked about a little bit. It's funny because when I looked it up and I read it, in one version it says there are two women who came to the king and stood before him. But you know, some versions leave a word out, and it's Mother's Day, and I didn't really want to say it, but it says the two women who were harlots or prostitutes came to the king. Now, some versions leave that word out, and I thought, well, that isn't very Mother's Day for me to be using that part of it, but that is what it says. But these two women came and stood before the king, and one woman said, "Pardon me, my lord. This woman and I live in the same house, and I've given birth to a child, and she also has one in the house. And it happened on the third day after I gave birth that this woman also gave birth to a child, and we were together. There were no strangers with us in the house, only two of us in the house. When the woman's son died in the night because she laid on him, she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from beside me, swapped the babies." Sounds like 2020 here, doesn't it? It happens on TV.
Yeah.
Tonight's episode of Kings and Kings. And so when I got up in the morning to nurse my son, behold, he was passed away. He was dead. And then I told the woman, "Behold, this is not my son." So they came before him. The two women are arguing. But the first woman said, "No, this is not your son. This is my son." And so they're arguing. So they spoke before the king. And the king said to the one who said, "This is my son that is living," to the one that is dead, the other, back and forth he's going. I'm skipping down. The king says this, King Solomon says this. He says, "Go get a sword, bring it before me." And the king said, "Cut the living child in two, and give half to one and half to the other woman." Sounds like an easy solution, right? Now I fixed it. Y'all are laughing. How many of you, when your two kids have been fighting over something, have said, "Fine, split it"? It's the same principle. It's biblical, see? It says, so the king says, "Cut that kid in half, and you can both take part of it home, settle it." And one of the women, put it that way, she says, "Pardon me, my lord, give her the living child. By no means kill him." The other woman says, "No, go on, cut him up in half. We're going to split him. Give the first woman the living child. By no means kill him." So King Solomon says, "Okay." What does King Solomon know? He knows who the real mom is, right? Because every real mom's going to be what? She ain't going to say, "Cut my kid in half, split him up." She's going to say she would rather him go with that evil woman than die.
Yep.
The woman was willing to sacrifice her child because she loved him. Not like altar sacrifice, but give it up. Just like Hannah. We see this again with the story of Moses. She was so, the decree had gone out, they were going to kill babies. She puts her child, you know, it's funny when you really think about it, in a little crib, pushes them down the river. Little basket down there. But she had to sacrifice. She gave up her child to save her child. We see this in the Bible a lot. And it's interesting when we will, if we put our trust in the Lord, if we will put our faith in God, we see that God does some amazing things in these stories, doesn't he? Because what does God work out with Moses' mom? She ends up taking care of her own child because she trusted God. The woman here says, you know what? I would rather my child be raised by somebody else than die. And what does God do? God gives the wisdom to the king to see through what was going on and say, no, this is your child. You know, the Bible's full of mamas. Good ones, bad ones, good ones with bad intentions. How many of us have known maybe a mama that had good intentions? We grade on the curve. How many of you, if your child's not in here, you can raise your hand. How many of you say, mommying is hard, isn't it? It's tough work. I can't imagine it. And then I think about, as hard as it is for moms, think about Mary. Mary's young. I believe, personally, the Bible doesn't give us any record of it, so this is just my speculating, but I believe Mary had a good mama. Because I don't think God was going to trust a young lady to raise his son that didn't have some good things instilled in her. The fruit of the Spirit. Faith. Can you imagine? I mean, the problem with this story sometimes is we tell it so much that sometimes it just becomes the story, and we really don't think about how young Mary was. And that Mary stepped out on faith, and God specifically showed up. We know, we talk about that at Christmas, that it makes it a little easier when God, the angel's in the room with you, right? I mean, it's a little easier if the angel's in the room and says do something. But that's no different than the Word of God. We have that. It's called the Bible. But here's Mary, a young woman, young. And God says, you're going to raise my son. No pressure. You know? Maybe we would think of this, if we were drawing this up, if you were going to entrust your child with somebody, if you're hiring a babysitter, what do they bring over? Some references. Have you ever watched a kid before, right? That's a good plus, right? Have you ever been with a kid? Do you know what to do when they cry? They cry? Okay, thank you. Next. I mean, right? As mamas, you kind of know some things you're looking for, and you can go, mm-mm. Or you're like, boy, they're in for it. Oh, it's just going to be great. Here's Mary, trusting the Lord to raise the Son of God. You know, I have a question. I wonder, do y'all think Mary was allowed to spank you? I mean, you're allowed to spank the Lord? I mean, how does that work? You know, when you get up, when the roles are reversed and they both get to heaven and he goes, Mom, did you really have to that one time? It really was my brother. But think about that weight. Could you imagine? Not just the weight of raising a child, but now all of a sudden God says, you're going to... It wasn't like Mary had 7 kids, and so God looked down and goes, this lady's got it down. I mean, look at her. Her kids are doing it all perfect. No problems. Excellent. Good godly character. She can raise some kids. That's the one. But he saw something deep down inside of her. That she had faith. And even this woman who raises Jesus, raises him right, because as we know, his first miracle was done by, what was the command? By his mama. Mama said. I mean, we think this, we joke about it, but what did Jesus do? He did what his mom said. Mom said, we're out of wine, fix it, Jesus. And Jesus said, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And I know it's silly, and we joke, and it's hard for us as humans to understand the dynamics of God and man and Mary and how does this work and how is that relationship, because he's God, but he has a mom, an earthly mom. And so the aspects of him as a man, he loves Mary as his mom. And that's weird because we can start thinking about, well, but he's God, and so it is, but it's mom. And even though he was God, he entrusted a mom to pick him up when he scuffed his knee. I mean, he could have reached down there and said, heal in my name. You know? Bumped his head instead of coming crying, all better in my name. But before he got to be doing those things, there was mom. See, we all got a mom. I was thinking about it this morning. This is the way my mind works. I was thinking, you know, but why? Why did God do it that way? Why? Why was there a baby? Why didn't Jesus just show up in the wilderness at like 30 years old? Poof, come out. I'm God. Right? I mean, was anybody going to call us bluff on it? Does it matter? You know, or we're going to be like, no, you're not. Watch me. Bam. You know, and just started doing miracles. I mean, we don't think about it that way. God could have done it any way he wanted. He's God. He makes up the rules. He could have done it any way he wanted. And I know we would say, well, the Old Testament said this way, so okay. He could have changed the Old Testament, said there will be a man coming, and he will not be, and then he will be, and he will be my son. And are we going to argue with those scriptures if that was what the scripture said? We'd be like, oh no, that's just the way it is. That's how God does things. And we would all believe that as truth in scripture and be fine with it. Nobody's going to go, you know, I'm not going to really believe in this guy and go to heaven. I don't think that's the way it works. No, we would have accepted it. But he decided that a mom was going to take care of his son. That's some heavy responsibility. Now, I know in moms in here, you guys are, what's the mother hen thing, and you're protective, and if you need to get somebody out of the building that's dangerous, you just send the mother hen in there. And she will, it don't matter who they are. School teachers protecting children, mamas, right? The protective nature. I get that. And so that's what God was looking down and going, yeah, I need a mom to take care of. I'm afraid if I just gave him to Joseph, he might get lost, left him at the Starbucks or the hardware store, or, you know, there ain't no telling how Jesus would have turned out if it had just been Joseph raising him. They ate Hot Pockets all the time. Right? But he needed a mom. He needed somebody to nurture, to care. And that's something moms do. How do moms do it? I don't know. It's hard. It's a mantle I'm glad I don't have to carry. Jesus. On the cross. Remember who Jesus is? Jesus is the Son of God. On the cross. We remember his last words pretty well, don't we? You know who he tells one guy at the foot of the cross to do? Paraphrase it here and summarize it. He tells somebody, one of the disciples, to take care of his mom. Jesus, the Son of God, who was God, he's God. He could look, don't you think he could probably do that? But he tells John, take care of my mom. Think about that. Some of his last words as he's dying, he looks down and he says, take care of my mom. Now, as children in here, and men, and all of that, let that sink in. That's the power of a mom. For God himself to say. Now, how would you like that responsibility, first of all? I mean, we're talking about some heavy weight here. First of all, Mary gets it to raise the Son of God. And then Jesus himself there in God, God himself also looks down then at John and says, hey, look, Yeah, we got a lot of stuff we're going to be doing here, and there's going to have to be books that are going to be written, and you're going to write a whole bunch of that stuff. Take care of my mom. Not make sure everybody understands how I walked on the water. Make sure everybody understands John 3:16. Make sure everybody understands, take care of my mom. I mean, that's power. Moms, that's the power you bring. That's what you bring to the table, is for Jesus to say, take care of my mom. And that's a good example that she raised Jesus right, because when he left, he said, take care of my mama. Because I know how my brothers are. He went outside the family right there. And some of y'all in here are going, yeah, I understand that too. But he looked down and said, take care of my mama. So moms, there are not enough days and words and times for us to say thank you for all that you do, for all the stuff that you do that we don't know, for the weight that you carry, for the guidance that you give, the example you set. You know, moms are, you know, we used to say it was something. We're living in a time where it's not as common. Let's just put it that way. People are becoming more and more self-absorbed. And so being what we would call a natural mom instinct is going away. Those things are not there. Moms are not putting children first, family first. They're putting themselves first in a selfish way and in a bad way. And so for those of you that have taken that mantle and done it right and have modeled Christ for your children, and you've done the right thing, and I'll say this lastly, sometimes we don't know all the answers, and that's okay also. Sometimes we are learning on the, as they say, on the fly, right, as we go. And, you know, we can read all the books on how to be a mom, and then wait 2 years, and what do? They get new books that are changing, and it's not what they said it was, and it's this, and it's that, and so it's just hard. But pray, seek the Lord, because He knows. He guides us. Take the good, youngins, take the good of your mom. And know that as a mom, you have been given a heavy responsibility. But God wouldn't have given it to you if He didn't know you couldn't do it. And that's the great thing about it. That with Him, all things are possible. We can do these things that seem hard in those long, late nights with your children, that it's worth it. That it's worth it. And if you bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I just pray this morning that as we, as a society, take a day to try to honor our moms, that we really should have that mindset every day. That it shouldn't just be once in May, that we should be thankful of a good mom every day. That most of the times we don't really see the impact they have in our life. All the little things that they do that we don't know about. All the things they do once we've gone to sleep. Once we left the home, we think they're done momming. But that the role of a mom never ends. That responsibility. And that if we would take the time to just seek you, that you're the ultimate example of a good parent. That you can guide us and how to love our children, how to model, how to love, how to be patient. So I pray as we leave this morning, not just as just the moms, but the dads also, and the children, that we would understand that we need the Holy Spirit to produce these things in our life. That we would yield to Him, that we would be obedient to His voice. And we ask this in Jesus' mighty name. And everybody said, Amen.